Shadows, the horror movie heroes, by Clouds, My Head in the Clouds, Not Coming Down. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 3, Introductions. Mom fretted in the doorway as Izuku organized his notes and papers so that Shinso wouldn't be too overwhelmed when he arrived. Thankfully, he didn't seem like the type who scared too easily, or else Izuku would have already ruined all chances for their friendship, partnership, whatever it was before it even began. It wasn't his fault that he got so excited. It hadn't even occurred to him that Shinso might not be nearly as excited as he was about using fear to become a different kind of hero. To Izuku, the realization felt like it had completely turned the world on its head. Becoming a hero like All Might had always felt like an impossible mountain he needed to climb, and every person who called him weak or useless just because he didn't have a quirk was yet another boulder that he needed to scramble over just to find the path, not to mention actually climbing the mountain. Once he stopped worrying about being liked, though, it was like someone had taken dynamite to the road and blown all the boulders to shreds. It was still an uphill battle, but now it was doable. If he didn't have to be liked, then all he had to do was be hated, and Izuku had plenty of experience with that. For the first time in his life, I'm going to be a hero felt less like a dream and more like a promise. And even if it was a little selfish, he really hoped that Shinso felt the same way. It would be a lot easier to be a hero if he actually had someone rooting for him. The doorbell rang and Izuku leapt to his feet. I'll get it! Mom pursed her lips as he pushed past her, and Izuku felt a pang of guilt. She was always a bit disappointed whenever he got a renewed sense of hero fervor, and he was pretty sure that she was secretly hoping that he'd come home one day and announce that he'd decided on a more sensible, safer career. However much he hated worrying her, though, he hated the idea of being useless even more. So hopefully, she'd at least be proud of him. Shinso looked bored when Izuku opened the door, but his stance was guarded. So Izuku suspected that it was an intentional move. Kind of like how Izuku sometimes smiled to hide how nervous he was. Izuku grinned brightly and grabbed Shinso's arm. If he was feeling anxious, then Izuku would just have to show him that there was nothing to be nervous about. Come on in, I've been waiting for you. Shinso didn't say anything, but he did nod and take off his shoes, so Izuku kept rambling to fill the silence. My room is this way. I hope you don't mind that I've kind of been getting a head start on some research. Shinso was already starting to lose a little bit of his bored expression. Research? Izuku shrugged. Like tactics and strategy, you know? Like how fear tactics have been used in the past. Some of them obviously rely on a lot of violence, so those aren't really something we want in our arsenal. But we should still know they exist, and maybe we can find a way to modify them to fit our goals a little better. Shinso raised an eyebrow. So basically, you've been studying villains? Izuku blushed. Not just villains. Good. Shinso smirked. How else are we supposed to scare them out of their minds if we don't know what they're used to? I like the idea of turning their own tricks against them. It's like intentional karma. Izuku blinked. I hadn't thought of it like that. Izuku, Mom said softly, is this your friend? Yeah! Izuku stepped to the side so she could see him better. This is Shinso! Shinso gave her a little wave, and Izuku realized he was probably used to introducing himself silently so that he didn't make anyone uncomfortable with his quirk. Izuku understood. He didn't often introduce his quirk at first because he was afraid of how people would react, but he didn't have to worry about people getting scared, just hostile. He just wished that Mom hadn't looked so grateful that Shinso stayed quiet. He probably shouldn't have told her about Shinso's quirk, but when he'd said that he was inviting a friend over, she wanted to know everything about him. Izuku had, as usual, gotten too excited and started rambling about how cool Shinso's quirk was, because it was, and how it was going to be so useful when they were heroes. It wasn't until he saw the terrified look on her face that he realized she might see Shinso as a threat and not an ally. Instead, he started being more vague, but the damage had already been done. At least he'd managed to convince her to let him come over still. But realistically, he knew that Mom only allowed it so that she could supervise them instead of letting Izuku go off to meet with his dangerous new friend somewhere where she couldn't protect him. It wasn't fair, but Izuku was going to become just as dangerous as Shinso was and prove that he didn't need her protection. They were going to be amazing heroes. Mom smiled nervously at Shinso and turned back to Izuku. Okay. Well, keep the door open, and I'll be out here if you need anything, baby. Anything at all. Just yell, okay? Izuku's heart sank. Got it. Mom nodded and stepped aside so that she wasn't blocking the hallway. Izuku didn't say anything else as he led Shinso to his room and closed the door as much as possible so that it was just barely cracked open. He grimaced and turned to Shinso. I am so sorry. Shinso shrugged. My foster parents are the same way. Don't worry about it. I mean, we're trying to turn that fear to our advantage, right? That's kind of the whole idea. Izuku frowned and went to his desk. I guess so. Okay, here's everything I've got so far. Where do you want to start? Toshinori was a little overwhelmed at the moment. He wasn't ready to retire yet. There were still so many people to save, and the world still needed a symbol of peace. Sure, Nedzu had pointed out that teaching wasn't really a retirement, but Toshinori still felt like he was forced away from the front lines. He had to face the truth. All Might was past his prime. Still, retirement or no, Toshinori knew that he wouldn't be able to really rest until he had found a successor. One for All was a sacred power, and the next symbol of peace would be able to care for the world in his place. So it was his responsibility to nurture their progression and encourage them to become the shining pinnacle of justice he had once been. The only issue was, well, finding the perfect successor. Toshinori put his vibrating phone back in his pocket, deciding to let Night Eye's call go to voicemail. Again, it was impossible to tell whether he was calling about One for All or about Toshinori's new job at UA. Well, maybe it wasn't impossible, but that would require actually picking up the phone and talking to him. So it was out of the question. Whatever conversation Night Eye wanted, Toshinori wasn't ready to have it yet. For now, he needed to focus on finding his elusive successor. He could always wait until classes started at UA and have his pick from among the elite students there, but he couldn't help feeling anxious to find the next symbol of peace as soon as humanly possible. If he could find a first year before they entered UA, then there was a chance they'd be able to receive One for All before classes even started. Yes, that would be the best case scenario. He wished he knew who had somehow gotten Sludge Villain to run the other day. He had been standing in the crowd cursing himself when the cry went out that All Might was just down the street, so he knew it had been a ruse, but somehow it had been just enough to get the villain to drop the hostage, which was more than any of the heroes present had accomplished. The child that had started the cry undoubtedly had a good head for strategy and would likely make a good successor, but no one had been able to tell who exactly had been the one to set the plan in motion, so there was no way for Toshinori to find them. Toshinori was obviously a little disappointed, but the child would undoubtedly become a great hero on their own merits someday, so he couldn't afford to spend too much time worrying about it. He just needed to find someone with a good heart and a strong enough will that Toshinori stumbled as he ran into someone, knocking them to the ground. He'd been too wrapped up in his thoughts. He shouldn't have gotten so distracted. Some hero he was. He bent over to help the man up. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going. This is all my fault. You think? A young lady glared at him as she practically pushed him out of the way to help the man up. Are you okay, Dad? The man laughed and rolled his shoulder. I'm fine. You're stronger than you look, man. Thank you, Toshinori said nervously. Again, I'm so sorry. You better be. The young lady hadn't stopped glaring at him. You could have hurt him, especially if you've got a strength quirk. Watch where you're going next time. Don't be rude, Kyoka. He already apologized. The man smiled. My name is Kyotoku Jiro, and this is my daughter, Kyoka Jiro. And seriously, don't sweat it. I'm just fine. Well, that's good to hear. Toshinori said, it's admirable that you are so concerned about your father's safety, young lady. Well, somebody has to be, young Jiro muttered. Goodness knows he doesn't care about it enough. Kyotoku laughed and ruffled her hair. Well, that's what I have you for, my little hero, and soon enough the entire world is going to see it. Once you get into UA, Jiro pushed him away. Stop it, Dad, you're so embarrassing. Toshinori perked up. You're going to UA? I have to pass the entrance exam first, Jiro huffed, but yeah, that's the plan. Toshinori considered his next move carefully. This young lady was a bit rough around the edges, but she had an inner fire and protectiveness that reminded him of Nana. She would make a wonderful hero, and, with some training, she had the potential to be an amazing symbol of peace, too. He also couldn't deny that a 10-month head start would give her a huge advantage over if he waited until school began. And since she already had the drive to be a hero, he nodded firmly, mind made up. I have considerable experience working with heroes. In fact, I've worked at All Might's agency for almost my entire career. Toshinori smiled softly. I'd be happy to help train you for the entrance exam if you'd like. Really? Kyotoku's eyes widened. Well, Kyoka, what are you waiting for? This is the opportunity of a lifetime. You know what I always say, never turn down an adventure, say yes. Jiro just ignored her father and looked at Toshinori skeptically. And what would this training look like? Muscle training, mostly, Toshinori answered, a bit thrown off, and quirk training. Who knows, with enough training, your quirk might develop into something else entirely. I have other resources that, if you choose to accept them, will set you on a path to becoming one of the greatest heroes in the world. Jiro frowned for a long moment, and Toshinori was terrified she was going to say no until she shrugged. Well, it's not like I have another training plan right now, but this had better be worth it, okay? If not, I'm dropping you. Toshinori blinked in shock. Of course. That sounds reasonable. Jiro nodded, and her father instantly wrapped an arm around both of them. Oh, my little girl's going to be a hero. Dad. Jiro blushed. I'm not a little girl anymore. Toshinori smiled. The girl knew how to stand up for herself. Good. He had a feeling he'd made the right choice. End of chapter.